Okay, so you know how we like to do these deep dives?
Well,
Strap in, because today we are diving headfirst into some pretty major potential changes brewing in the Department of Defense.
oh yeah, this one's a biggie.
Right. And you guys are the ones who flagged this for us, Section 201 of the Forged Act.
He's definitely got people talking.
For sure. And for good reason. We're talking about a potential shift from program executive officers, those PEOs we always hear about, to something called portfolio acquisition executives, or PAEs.
Sounds like a simple name change, right?
Well, on the surface, maybe, but from what we've been digging into, it could be a whole lot more than just new business cards. Our mission today is to really break down what this could mean, like really mean, for how the DoD buys and manages all those critical programs, the big ticket items, the stuff that keeps things, well, running.
We don't want to just throw jargon at you, though.
No way.
Yeah.
We want to translate the policy speak into, plain English. And not just what's changing, but like why? Well, what's the thinking behind it? What are the potential impacts, good and bad? How can you actually wrap your head around this without getting lost in the weeds?
So should we just dive right in?
Let's do it. PEO to PAE. Let's unpack this thing. So to kick things off, this might sound like just a simple name change, but our sources are suggesting it could be a pretty monumental shift. What's your take on that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Section 201 of this Forged Act, it's really getting at the heart of how the DoD structures its acquisition leadership. Big picture stuff. Like you said, historically, we've had PEOs, program executive officers, each one responsible for managing a specific weapon system or a specific program, all under that big umbrella of Title 10.
Right. The rulebook.
Exactly. And this recommendation is saying, okay, let's shake things up a bit. Let's move away from these individual program managers and transition those roles into these, what do they call them?
Portfolio acquisition executives.
Portfolio acquisition executives. PAEs. That's a mouthful. But here's the thing.
What's that?
This isn't some sudden, out-of-the-blue idea. It's more like the culmination of years of trying to reform how the DoD handles acquisitions.
Okay, yeah. It's not like everyone was happy with the way things were running, right?
Not exactly. I mean, think about all those reports from the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, and the Congressional Research Service, the CRS. They've been pointing out the same problems for years. Things like fragmented oversight, like you have different programs all doing similar stuff, but they're not talking to each other.
Reinventing the wheel over and over again.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of being slow to adapt, especially when it comes to new technologies.
Like the DoD needs to be faster, more nimble, right?
100%. And if you look back, this shift has actually been building for a while now. Recent National Defense Authorization Acts, like back in fiscal years 2020 and 2023, they already started nudging the DoD toward this more portfolio-based management approach, kind of laying the groundwork,
So this isn't a totally new concept.
Not at all. And Section 201 of the Forged Act, it really formalizes things. It actually amends Title 10 of the U.S. Code, like literally replacing the words program executive officer with portfolio acquisition executive.
Whoa, they're serious about this.
Oh, yeah. And Senator Roger Wicker, he's the one who introduced this provision back in December 2024. So it's clear Congress wants to shake things up, make defense innovation more streamlined. And they're throwing on recommendations from within the DoD itself. You can actually find some of this stuff on defense.gov and innovation.defense.gov.
Okay, so we've got some historical context, but the real question everyone's asking is why? Why make this change now? What's the problem they're trying to solve by moving to this PAE model? What are the benefits they're hoping to see?
Great question. The analyses we've looked at highlight a bunch of desired outcomes. First one that jumps out is agility. The idea is that a PAE managing multiple programs that are all kind of connected as one big portfolio can react faster, shift resources, adjust strategies much quicker than if each program was operating in its own little silo.
Makes sense. More flexibility, less bureaucracy.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Imagine you're building a ship. Instead of having separate project managers for the engines, the hull, the weapons systems, all working independently, you have one portfolio manager overseeing the whole shipbuilding effort. If one part hits a snag, they can adjust, shift resources, maybe even bring in a new technology that benefits multiple systems.
So instead of each program being its own little fiefdom, you have a more holistic view.
Exactly. And that leads to the second big benefit, better coordination. Imagine different program offices all buying similar components but not talking to each other, not coordinating. That's the kind of inefficiency this is trying to fix. By centralizing requirements, budgeting, acquisition, all under one PAE for a group of related programs, the hope is to cut down on redundancies, get everyone on the same page, and make sure they're all rowing in the same direction.
This sounds good in theory. What else?
Well, another big one is boosting innovation. The idea is that a PAE with this broader view across multiple programs would have the authority to adjust the scope of individual programs more easily. So if a new technology pops up that could benefit multiple systems, they can make that happen without having to go through a ton of red tape.
So more power to the PAE to adapt and evolve. I like it.
Right, and then there's the accountability piece. PAEs are supposed to have direct control over their staff, and they're responsible for performance evaluations across their whole portfolio. The thinking is that this creates a clearer chain of command, better alignment with overall DoD goals, no more passing the buck.
So more responsibility, but also more ownership.
Exactly. And finally, streamlined decision-making. With PAEs overseeing bigger chunks of the acquisition pie, the hope is that the whole procurement process becomes more efficient, less bogged down by layers of approvals.
Okay, so theoretically, this all paints a pretty rosy picture. A more agile, efficient, and innovative acquisition system. But let's be real. Big changes like this, they don't happen without some bumps in the road. What are some of the potential downsides, the challenges that people are worried about?
Right. It's not all sunshine and roses. One concern is this idea of over-centralization. There's a risk that PAEs could end up in charge of portfolios that are just too big, too complex for any one person to handle effectively. And that could lead to bottlenecks, slowdowns in decision-making, especially for those really technical, complex programs.
So like, instead of speeding things up, you could actually end up slowing things down.
It's a possibility. Remember our shipbuilding analogy. Imagine one person trying to manage every single detail of building an aircraft carrier, a submarine, and a destroyer, all at the same time.
Yeah, sort of like a recipe for disaster. What else?
Well, there's also concern about losing some of that program-specific expertise. When you shift the focus from the nitty-gritty of managing individual systems to this broader portfolio view, there's a risk that some of that deep, specialized knowledge within individual PEO teams could get lost or diluted.
Right, because you still need people who really understand the ins and outs of each specific program. Right?
Absolutely. And then there's the human element. Change is hard, especially for folks who've built their careers around doing things a certain way. Resistance from current PEOs who've poured years into their programs is definitely a real possibility. And that kind of friction could disrupt the transition, impact morale, create some bumps along the way.
People get attached to their projects, their teams.
Yeah.
It's understandable.
It is. And then there's the issue of consistency. If the DoD isn't crystal clear about how this transition should work, you could end up with different military departments implementing things in different ways, a patchwork approach that leads to disparities and confusion.
So a lack of clear guidance could undermine the whole effort.
Exactly. And last but not least, there's the potential for an increased administrative burden on the PAEs themselves. They're going to be managing bigger teams, more programs, more evaluations. It could get overwhelming.
So more responsibility, but also more paperwork and headaches.
You got it. But here's the good news. The analyses we've looked at also outline some ways the DoD is planning to address these potential challenges.
Oh, good. They're not just going into this blindly.
No, they're thinking ahead. For example, to help with the potential for overload, they're talking about a phased transition, maybe bringing in deputy PAEs initially to help manage the workload, kind of an easing in process.
Makes sense. Don't bite off more than you can chew.
Right. And to make sure that program-specific knowledge doesn't disappear, they're considering specialized training programs within PAE teams. So you still have those deep technical experts, even as the structure changes.
So investing in training to bridge the gap.
Yep. And they're also talking about change management programs. This is key, right? Communicating the rationale for the change, addressing concerns, getting buy-in from stakeholders.
Bringing people along, making them part of the process.
Exactly. And to avoid that patchwork problem we talked about, they're emphasizing the need for standardized guidelines, best practices across all the military departments. Everyone needs to be on the same page.
One team, one fight, one set of rules. Got it.
And finally, to help PAEs focus on the big picture, the strategic stuff, they're looking at delegating those more routine tasks to deputies and support staff, freeing up their time for the important things.
So recognizing that PAEs can't do it all. They need support.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, understanding these potential challenges and how the DoD is planning to address them can be incredibly valuable. It can help you anticipate the changes, navigate the transition, and maybe even contribute to making it a success.
For sure. Forewarned is forearmed.
Yeah.
So let's talk about who's going to feel this shift most directly. Who are the key players here?
Well, the analysis points to three main groups: current PEOs, deputy PEOs, and the broader acquisition workforce.
So the folks in the trenches.
Exactly. Current PEOs, they're the ones who are going to be stepping into these new PAE roles. It's a big opportunity, more responsibility, broader authority, but it's also going to be a lot more work.
Stepping up to the plate, big time.
Right. And then you have the deputy PEOs. Their roles are going to change too, shifting to support this portfolio-wide perspective. They might move away from focusing on a single program and start working on broader issues across multiple programs.
So a more strategic role.
Yep. And then, of course, you have all the folks in the acquisition workforce, the thousands of people working on these programs every day. They're likely going to end up reporting to these new PAEs, which could mean changes in their reporting structures, their performance evaluations, the whole 9 yards.
So a big shift in the organizational chart for a lot of people. Now let's talk about resistance. We touched on this earlier, but let's dig a little deeper. Who's likely to push back against this change and why?
The analysis suggests that some existing PEOs might be hesitant. They might worry about losing some of that autonomy, that direct control they have over the programs they've been running.
They've built their careers around these programs.
Exactly. And then you have the service acquisition executives. They might have concerns about how this shift could impact their own influence, their ability to set priorities and assign programs.
So a potential power struggle.
It's possible. And then there are the contractors. They might worry about how these portfolio realignments could disrupt their existing relationships, change how contracts are managed, create uncertainty about future opportunities.
A lot of unknowns, a lot of potential for disruption.
Right. And that's why resources are so crucial. For this kind of transformation to work, the DoD needs to invest in making it happen.
So what kind of resources are we talking about here?
Well, first and foremost, funding for those training programs we talked about.
Yeah.
The workforce needs to be equipped to handle these new roles, these new responsibilities.
Investing in people, their skills.
Yep. And then there's the need for additional personnel to support the PAEs. More deputies, more analysts, more administrative staff. They're going to need help to manage the increased workload.
So building out the teams, providing the support structure.
Exactly. And then maybe the most crucial piece of robust IT systems. You're talking about managing massive amounts of data across these larger portfolios. You need the right tools for the job.
So it's not just about rearranging the chairs on the deck. It's about investing in the whole infrastructure.
Totally. Now, the big question is, how will the DoD know if this whole PEO to PAE transition is actually working? How will they measure success?
Great question. What are the metrics?
The analysis mentions a few key indicators. First, they'll be looking at whether they can shorten those acquisition timelines, get new capabilities into the hands of warfighters faster.
Speed is key.
Absolutely. They'll also be tracking the program delivery rate, making sure that programs are actually being completed and fielded successfully. And then, of course, there's the cost factor. Are they achieving cost savings through these more efficient, coordinated processes?
Saving taxpayer dollars. Always a good thing.
Right. They'll also be evaluating the performance of the PAE teams themselves, maybe using specific portfolio performance metrics. And finally, they'll be looking at adaptability. Can the DoD now respond more quickly and effectively to those new technologies, those game-changing innovations?
Staying ahead of the curve. So a lot of different ways to measure whether this is actually working as intended.
Yep. And it's worth noting that the PAE model wasn't the only option on the table. The analysis mentions that other approaches were considered.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, one idea was a hybrid model, keeping traditional PEOs for the really critical complex programs, but introducing PAEs for a more general oversight role across the less complicated stuff. Or they could have just given existing PEOs more authority without doing this whole PAE transition.
So a less radical approach.
Right. But in the end, they went with the PAE model.
Interesting. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's hit the highlights. What are the key takeaways for our listeners? What do they absolutely need to remember about this potential shift from PEOs to PAEs?
The main thing is that this is a big deal. This transition, as it's laid out in Section 201 of the Forged Act, has the potential to significantly change how the DoD does business. It's all about making acquisition more agile, more coordinated, more innovative. But it's not a magic bullet. There are challenges, potential downsides that need to be addressed. over-centralization, the risk of losing expertise, the inevitable resistance to change.
So a mixed bag, but with the potential for big rewards if they get it right.
Exactly. And the DoD has laid out some strategies to mitigate those risks. But being aware of those challenges, understanding who might be impacted and why they might resist, that's all valuable information for anyone who's part of this ecosystem, whether you're a PEO, a contractor, or just someone who wants to understand how the DoD works.
Knowledge is power right there. So there you have it. A deep dive into the proposed move from PEOs to PAEs. Staying informed about these kinds of fundamental shifts is crucial for anyone involved in or even just watching the defense world. And on that note, here's a final thought for you to chew on.
Hit us with it.
Given the potential for both huge efficiency gains and some pretty big transitional hurdles, what aspects of this shift do you think will be the most critical to watch in the years to come? Is it about training the workforce, getting those IT systems in place, or figuring out the right oversight structure? What do you think will make or break this whole effort? We encourage you to dig into the Forged Act, check out those resources we mentioned, and keep learning. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Always a pleasure. Until next time.